you need to flirt with the world and it will flirt back at you. And I really liked that because I feel like that was definitely what I was doing a lot at the start and still try to do. But, definitely I was just absolutely, putting myself out there and flirting with the world in that sense, because I just had so much passion for it. And I also had an insane amount of just teenage energy, which now I'm like, oh my God, I was in the music school I was at was 5 days a week, 9 to 4. And then it took me about an hour to get there from where I lived. So I would have to wake up at, 6:37 every day. And after school every day, I would then go and play at like open mics, and I would just look up online, London open mics tonight or whatever. And I'd go there on my own.
Girli, welcome to From Vision to Creation. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm honored.
Girli, I'm honored that you're here, and I think you're so talented. And one of the things that really stood out to me the most about your music is that you have such a gift at telling a story through music.
Aww.
And it's so relatable in so many unexpected ways even. Because I remember when I first started listening to your music, I thought, oh, it's good music. I liked the melodies, I liked the lyrics. But I think there's a moment where you're listening to music and you're enjoying it just for the sake of the song. But then you really start to listen to what the lyrics are and envision yourself within the story. And yours does that so beautifully. And I feel like too, like your music, it just makes people feel seen, and it's just super relatable. So I'm super excited to go into your story and learn about some of the insights you've discovered along the way.
Oh my God, that was what one intro. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. You made it easy, Girli.
Yeah, no, I'm stoked. I'm a professional yapper, so I'm good at talking. So I'm so ready.
Well, you're in the right place.
Yeah,
you're
perfect.
at the right place. Well, Girli, let's start all the way at the beginning. I want you to take us back to your childhood and tell us about the time that you first discovered that you were creatively inclined, or when you fell in love with music. Was music the first thing that really caught your attention as a kid?
So I'm very lucky that I grew up in a household of creatives. My parents are both actors, and I just grew up with most of my family on my mum's side. My grandparents were actors as well, and I was kind of surrounded by performance and creativity, which I think at the time I just kind of, when you're a kid, you're just like, cool, like mommy goes and does is on the stage every night. That's just a normal job, right? And then I remember being in school and all the other kids being like, no, my mum gets home at 5:30 and we have dinner together. And I was like, oh, my mum I say hi when I get home from school, and then she goes off and she performs in front of, hundreds of people. And that was so normal. And then I think when I realized actually that's a really that's such a unique job to have. And so I'm really grateful that I grew up, surrounded by creativity. So I think acting was kind of the first thing that I thought. I just assumed, you see what your parents do and you're like, oh, I want to do that. And so I did a lot of, school theater. I was in the plays at school, and I did a weekend drama club and stuff. But I think when I became a teenager, that's when I realized music was my thing. And because of the story writing thing, I think I initially, my favorite subject at school was actually English literature, because I loved reading and writing. I loved writing short stories and things like that, and poetry. And then that sort of naturally transformed into music, because I was like, well, I love performing as well. How do I combine those things together? So yeah. And then it was when I was a teenager, I really realized, okay, started going to gigs and meeting people at gigs and seeing, bands on stage, and was like, wait, maybe this is something I could do. Maybe this could be my job, But I think it's cool because I think a lot of creatives, especially when you're young, don't naturally think, oh, I could turn my creativity and my passion into a job. But because I'd seen my parents do that with theirs, I already had that modeled for me, which I'm really grateful for. Because I think a lot of people, have families who are discouraging them and when it comes to, okay, that's fine, be creative as a hobby, but get a real job, And I think for me, my parents were mostly quite supportive. They were scared because they'd known from their, lives having creative careers that it's really unpredictable a lot of the time, but they were still supportive.
That's awesome. Because I remember when I told my mom that I did not want to go to college, that I just wanted to move to Los Angeles and do like electronic music production. She looked at me and she was like, no, we're not doing that.
She's like, there's no way in hell.
But that's really awesome that your parents were so supportive of you. And I read that you wrote your first song at 8 years old.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh. So funny.
I find that so interesting because I feel like sitting down to write music in general, it's a very vulnerable experience and you really have to be focused and present to like get it out of you, so to speak. What was it about you at 8 years old that felt the need to write a song?
Well, I always loved writing things down and creating things. I had loads of cuddly toys and I loved putting on plays and having them like perform and stuff. So I loved the idea of like creating something from thin air, I suppose. And I had a diary and I still journal every day. I loved writing and I started, I think quite early on. I was a big reader. There's all these pictures of me on family holidays and I was always buried in a book. So the idea of writing stuff down myself felt quite natural to me. But it's funny because I remember I knew I wanted to write something with melody, but I didn't yet have any musical ability. I think a little bit later on, I learned guitar and piano and to read music and what notes and chords were. But when I was a kid, I was like, how do I translate these melodies into how do I write them down? And I didn't have it was the 2000s. I was like, how do I record? I didn't have a phone or an iPad. I could just click record. So I was like, okay, how do I do this? And in my head, which now thinking about it, I'm like, it's kind of genius because as a child, I thought, okay, if I write the lyrics down, like as in a poem form, and then I'll just draw arrows above each syllable to represent, okay, I'm going to go up in melody here. Obviously, when reading it, there's it's illegible because you can't figure out what key are we in, what is that, a semitone, is that a tone? And I didn't understand all these concepts at the time, but yeah, so I wrote it. There was just these lyrics and then loads of arrows like up, down, up, down. And yeah, I think I remember singing it to my mom. And it's quite funny because I'm a very, very feminist artist now. A lot of my music has political messaging, feminist messaging. But I think the first song I ever wrote was actually about whether or not a boy liked me, and if he didn't like me, that would be really bad for me. Like, I think it was like really bizarre. And I think I sang it to my mum. And I remember her being like, okay, interesting. Because my parents are very liberal, very like pro being an independent young woman for me. And yeah, I think she was a bit concerned, but it's fine. It all worked out.
At 8 years old, I mean, that just blows me away.
I know, so funny.
Well, and Girly, you've mentioned that you've had a difficult time in school. How did those experiences shape who you are, not just as a person, but as an artist as well? And do you feel that experience kind of forced you to go inward?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, I really felt like an odd one out at school. I mean, even in primary school, I guess you'd say elementary, right? But as young as like, I think sort of 6 or 7, I just remember feeling like, oh, I feel feel different, and I feel quite just, I don't know, awkward around people, and I sort of had the feeling that I couldn't really find my tribe. And when I went into secondary schools, like middle school, high school in England, I was diagnosed with OCD, and that made a lot of sense. That kind of connected a lot of dots, and I started going to therapy for that. And I definitely realized, I think that was the first experience of me feeling like, oh, I'm kind of different, and feeling like shame for that. And then really sort of discovering that I was queer as well. And, it was high school in, the early 2010s. So it wasn't super LGBTQ friendly. It was very much, like pretty homophobic, and quite hard to sort of just navigate feeling like, okay, I want to explore my sexuality, but I also just, this feels like a really hostile environment for that. And then, when I started making music, I was really teased for that. Like I was bullied, just for being kind of a weirdo, kind of different. And so it was just, it was a very much 5 years of just feeling really othered and feeling really different and uncomfortable. And I think that made me look outwards for, okay, where can I find people who are more like me? And that's how I started going to gigs and discovering different music, and discovering queer artists as well. That was like so hugely important for me, coming to terms with my sexuality and feeling like, oh my gosh, there's people out there who are talking openly about being queer, and there are these musicians, and they're making, a life for themselves, and they're finding their own tribe and their own fans. And like that to me music felt like a way to have my own community, which I really lacked at school. And so, I think in a way, even though you could not pay me any amount of money to repeat high school,
No,
absolutely no way. And when I meet adults who say, oh, I miss high school, I'm like, we are fundamentally different people. I'm so happy for you that you had a good time. It was absolute hell for me. And, even though I would not repeat that for love nor money, I do feel like it did shape, how my music has always been about making people feel less alone and connecting with people who feel like an odd one out.
and I don't want to generalize, but I feel like for the most part, especially from my own experiences, people who are queer are very artistic and highly motivated in a way. And not to say that you need to be queer to be artistic, but I think that a lot of queer people are, because especially around the time that we grew up, I think we're about the same age. I'm 32.
Yeah, I'm 28. So like
Okay.
similar time. Yeah.
Around the time that we grew up, it wasn't as cool or as accepted as it is now. And I know there's still a lot of work to be done in that department, but it certainly was not as mainstream as it is now. There were very few openly queer role models.
Totally.
And I think that because of that, you do have to go within. You have to search for answers within, because what's happening out here is so painful and disappointing or lonely, that you have to process these really complicated emotions. And I believe that that's part of the reason why people can create art, is because they're in tune with those emotions and they've had to process them, or they're using their art to do so.
Yeah. Oh my God, totally. I think if you've experienced sort of having to almost create your own safe space, for yourself as well, like, if you struggled in school, or because people weren't welcoming to you, you sort of do also. For me, I wrote songs and I wrote short stories, and I went and tried to create my own community somewhere else. And so, I think the creativity element there is really, really potent. Yeah.
So I want to go back now to the moment where you realized, okay, I love music, and now you're going to actually do something about it to actually make it a career for yourself. What were the first steps that you took to actually make this happen?
I think it was it was a real it was a real fork in the road moment where I finished my GCSEs, which are sort of the exams that you do when you're 16 in the UK, and you do these exams, and then your results from those then determine the next 2 years of education, and then that determines where you go for university, right? And so I did really well in my GCSEs. I was really quite an academic, kid, and because of that, there was a lot of pressure from my school and my teachers. I mean, I went to a very like underfunded state school in, kind of a sort of unremarkable part of London where it was like the school really wanted, students who did well academically to make a name for themselves and, get into so-and-so X university so that the school could put that on, their alumni and stuff. And not a lot of students from that school went to good universities. So I think when I had my grades came back really good and they were predicted to be really good, there was a lot of pressure for me to go on a path of, okay, go and do something really academic. And I think my parents felt quite excited by that too, because they went to drama school, which obviously is a form of further education. But neither of them went to traditional university and did, degrees in things. And I think even though they were creative and they were supportive of my creativity, there was the sort of classic societal pressure of like, oh, but, wouldn't it be nice if our kid went to this amazing big, Oxford or Cambridge university and had got a scholarship somewhere, or, that would kind of be amazing. I think they felt that was quite alluring to them. And I just knew that's not what I wanted. I knew by that point I had to do music. It was this kind of driving thing of there's nothing else I want to do. And I made quite a bold decision where I said, no, I want to apply for these music schools that, don't get you all of the qualifications that you need to go into university. They actually put you in front of the industry, and there are a few in London that are really, really significant. And I got into one of them and sort of made that decision quite young to sort of be like, okay, I'm really like turning my back on this other path that is right there for me, and I'm going into what is quite an unknown, but I know is my passion. So I went to this amazing music school called ELAM, and which stands for East London Arts and Music. And I just started going to like every networking event I could, playing every open mic that I could. And this was this was like 2013, 2014. So this was pre-TikTok. Instagram was still really young. It was definitely more still an organic kind of way of getting yourself out there. Was, go and meet people and do shows, and you could get signed to a label without having a following already, which now I think it's really hard for new artists to do that, because actually labels expect artists to already have a huge TikTok following, which to me means that we're like losing out on so much incredible music from artists who are amazing at music and maybe they're not that good at marketing, which is fine because you're meant to be a musician, you're an artist. So I think I was lucky in that sense. I kind of was in this time frame where when I was going out and meeting people, managers and labels, and, playing shows to like 3 people. It wasn't like I was playing big shows instantly. I was playing open mics to no one. But it was the kind of thing where I could say, oh, if I went to a networking event and I met someone who works for a label, I could tell them to come along and see me perform. And they wouldn't care that there was no one there, because they're just seeing, is there potential in this person? And that's how I got my first manager. And then it kind of started rolling from there. I ended up dropping out of my music school after 1 year, not because it wasn't amazing, but because I got offered my first record deal and publishing it, and sort of everything just kind of started rolling. But it is really interesting because when I have a lot of young artists ask me, what's your advice to getting into the industry? And I say, it was a different industry for me. It was completely different because in the last, 10 years, TikTok and social media have changed everything. So I feel kind of bad when people ask me for advice because I'm like, I actually don't know. Like I'm also battling the algorithms of these social medias. So, but yeah, that's how I started.
Well, I absolutely love this because that is exactly what this show is all about. From vision to creation. Like you had a vision for your life and what you want and what pursuing your dream was going to look like, but then you actually executed on it and you made it happen. And I think that in terms of what to do for artists trying to make it today, I think that what your philosophy, your perspective and approach still applies. You have to figure out how are people doing it, and then most importantly, putting yourself out there.
Yeah, totally. I saw a video, actually, no. I had a real interaction with a human. It wasn't a video. Sometimes the two get conflated.
Oh yeah.
It was my friend telling me about a video that she saw. But my friend told me that she heard someone say that you need to flirt with the world and it will flirt back at you. And I really liked that because I feel like that was definitely what I was doing a lot at the start and still try to do. But, definitely I was just absolutely, putting myself out there and flirting with the world in that sense because I just had so much passion for it. And I also had an insane amount of just teenage energy, which now I'm like, oh my God, I was in the music school I was at was 5 days a week, 9 to 4. And then it took me about an hour to get there from where I lived. So I would have to wake up at, 6:37 every day. And after school every day, I would then go and play at like open mics. And I would just look up online, London open mics tonight or whatever. And I'd go there on my own. I'd play an open mic. And sometimes, the open mic might be from 6 p.m. till 11. And you'll sign up and they'll be like, cool, you're going to be on at 10:30. And you're like, so you have to sit there. And obviously, it's fun to watch everyone else play. But sometimes I'd finish at past 11 p.m., get the last train home, be in bed by like 1 a.m., up again at 6. And that was 5 days a week. And I honestly, I love being in bed at 10:30 now. So the idea of doing that now was wild. I think it was just, I just had that drive, that energy.
But I'm so glad that we're talking about this because I think that this is really important to highlight. You are an artist and that is the most important thing to you, but you also realize that it is a business and there is a way of getting things done. And I think that I wish somebody had said that to me when I was younger so that I could have applied that to my life and business and the things that I was trying to do, because I always kind of believed, especially like when I was in university, I believed that there was a magic factor. Like it kind of just is going to happen one day. I never really heard anybody talk about like the initial struggles or the no's that you're going to get at the very beginning of your career, and that's okay. Like I feel like people are talking about it more now, but for a long time, people were only, showcasing the glamorous moments, the shiny moments in their life, not like, hey, I had to be told no 1,001 times in order to get here. So I love that you're being so open about this part of the journey because it's important for younger aspiring artists.
Totally. It's really interesting to me, the concept of the no's and rejection, because I've been doing this for 10 years. I still get no's all the time. That's like an element of just being creative and also sort of trying to adapt to, an industry and a world that's always changing as well. And I think, being kind of having that initial huge drive definitely helped with that first big push. But I still feel, like sometimes I still feel like I'm still at the beginning of my career. And it's that classic thing of, oh my gosh, they were an overnight success in 15 years,
Right.
It's like, and with something like music, where a lot of the time success brings fame as well, a lot of people will discover me from a song I just put out. And so to them, I'm a new artist. And then there's people who are like, I've been here since 2016. And so it's, and I was thinking about how creative fields as well, a lot of the time, there's this sort of backwards view on how much time you've been doing it, which is so different to other careers. And I was thinking about a doctor, for example. If a doctor says, oh, I've been doing this for 25 years, you'd be like, amazing. Like, that makes me feel like you really know what you're doing. Incredible. You're, really peaking in your field. If I say to someone, oh, I've been doing this for 10 years, people sometimes go, oh, okay, you've been around for a while. And it's this weird thing of like, people really celebrate if you've been doing something for a really short time in music. People are like, wow, oh my gosh, they released their first song 6 months ago and they've blown up. And there's this thing of like, it's almost like more embarrassing to have been doing it for a longer time, which I really try to counter that by being like, no, I've been releasing music for 10 years and I have built so many amazing like fans along the way. I've had so many incredible experiences. It's been my job the whole time, which, I've paid my bills for the last 10 years with music. How incredible. And that's all I wanted. I always wanted a longevity, But it's so funny to me because then if a doctor said, oh, I've been, I just finished my studies 6 months ago and I've done one heart surgery, I'd be like, stay away from me, go back, study some more. I don't want you to, so it's funny to me how there is this real obsession with newness in music and in, acting and, lots of the arts. And I feel like we need a healthier balance of like also celebrating people who have been just at their craft for a really long time as well.
That is so interesting, and I've never thought of it that way, but that is so true. And I've had a similar discussion, not about music in particular, but we were talking about how when you're first starting something and you're posting about it, everyone's like, oh my God, it's cringe, right? Everyone's like hating on you and it's embarrassing because you're pursuing your passion. Like, which by the way, I don't get. Like, look at that person pursuing their passion. How embarrassing. Like,
oh God,
I'd rather them have a job that they hate like I do.
I know. It's ridiculous.
But it's not until things start to work out, whether that's in 6 months, 10 years, or 20, that I feel like a lot of people start to come around and say, I always knew you could do it.
Completely. Oh my gosh, completely. And I think, it is really funny how there is that mentality of like, oh my gosh, wow, look at this fresh new thing. And like, we'll just ignore the fact that, no, this person has been going for a really long time. Why don't we say, wow, look at this person who's just been absolutely just killing it, creating, like following their passion for so long. And now we're all hearing about them. How exciting. It's like with, I don't know, I was thinking about it with Chapel Roan when she blew up, and she was releasing music for 10 years before that. But no, I sort of didn't see that anywhere in any of the press. It was all like this brand new, fresh, this obsession with like new blood, and she actually came out and was like, I've been doing this for a really long time. You guys are just now finding out about it, but I'm proud of that, and I really liked that.
Yeah, I like that too. I think that it's going to shift as well, because I think there used to be more of a fixation, especially in the music industry, on young artists, like teenagers getting famous. I think that is kind of an antiquated way to look at things, because I think that for a while, only young people were consuming media at a voracious velocity. But now everybody has access. Almost everyone has an iPhone. Like everyone's on social media of all ages. So I think that is going to change. And the first person that comes to mind is Charlie XCX, another amazing artist who was making music for a long time and she's at the peak of her career right now, like in her 30s.
I mean, there is a hilarious picture, which is definitely available online somewhere, of me, age, I want to say 15, at a Charlie XCX concert.
Oh my God.
In London. And she was playing Heaven, which actually was my last London show was at Heaven, which was a cool full circle moment. And, I'm 28, so that was, I want to say 13 years ago, maybe. And she'd already been releasing quite a few albums by that point as well. I think she was on her third album, maybe. And I think about that a lot, where I'm like, oh, that's where I'm at. I'm about to release my third album. I just played Heaven. And it's so funny because the way I feel now is I'm like, gosh, there's still so many things I want to achieve and so many things I want to do. I hope I'm not too late, And I'm like, I bet she was feeling that then. And that was 13 years ago. And like, I wonder if someone said to her then, in 13 years, you're going to have your real big moment. She probably would have been like, 13 years, another 13 years, but it's so cool. I think, I think it's fascinating to see artists' journeys like that. And when you zoom out and see all of the different iterations and moments of it, it's so cool.
And let's go back to the record deal that you got at 17 years old, right? Which you dropped out of school to pursue. I know that you mentioned that wasn't actually the right thing for you, but let's go back to the beginning. You land this record deal. How are you feeling in that moment? And then what kind of happens as the reality starts to set in?
Yeah, I mean, getting that record deal was such a crazy feeling because, everyone in my music college, that was like the pinnacle of success. That was what we all wanted, was sign a record deal. And I signed one and I was like, oh my God, I've made it. That's the feeling. And I'm glad I felt excited like that because I should, I'd worked really hard and I'd been recognized by a big label and it was very exciting. And then I think what happened was the amount of pressure that was put on me very quickly, I was not prepared for. And I was so young. And I look back and I'm like, wow, what I needed being, I think I signed it when I was freshly 18. I think I turned 18 like a week before. So I was just an adult, barely. And I was also a really fledgling artist. And I think it would have been so amazing if they'd been like, cool, let's just let you write for a while and develop you and figure out what you like visually and this. And I had so many ideas and I had such a personality and I was writing so much and I loved performing. But there was very quickly this pressure of like, no, you don't have time to develop or figure things out. We're going to start releasing songs immediately from ones you've written and they have to be number one hits immediately. It was this thing of like, there was no kind of thing of a long-term career plan of like, cool, let's just begin this journey. It was like, the journey has to peak immediately. And that was so much pressure on my young brain, not fully formed brain. And very quickly I felt quite molded. I felt like they were sort of trying, when the first single and I look back and I was like, I was doing really well. I was putting out music and it was being noticed, but it wasn't making the label loads of money. It was just starting my career, And so for them, they were like, no, this is failing then. And very quickly, I got the sense of disappointment, which was so damaging, I think. And, I think I still really am impacted by that, actually, because from such a young age, I was being celebrated so much. And when I signed and they were like, you're the big new thing. And here's all this money to make loads of music videos. And we're so excited by you. And then within 6 months to a year, it was like, this is disappointing. This is not performing how we want it to do, la la la. And I started to feel like kind of some of the songs, the label started becoming more involved in the creative and saying, I think you should change these lyrics to make it more commercial. And I think we need to tone down the makeup. And I think we need to make this less punky and like more pop sounding. And, it was very much, I sort of, my project started slipping away from me. And I just was so young. I was like, cool, I guess I'm just going to listen to everything they say because I really want this. I really want it to work. So I guess, and I lost my own creativity because of that. And I think then it really affected my mental health because I just sort of felt like a failure and, felt like, oh, it's the end. And I was like 19, and I started drinking quite a lot. And doing drugs and just honestly sort of trying to escape. And I was also getting sent to all of these industry events and magazine and fashion events where there's just a free bar and, and you're like 19 and you're renting your first flat and you're the only one of your friends who has any money because you just signed a record deal. And so everyone's like, Millie's flat is the party flat, and it's, it just became like that. And I kind of just sort of went on a dark like path for a while because I just felt like all of these sort of adults, fully grown adults around me were telling this teenager like, you're not good enough, basically. And then I released my first album with them. And then after that, I got dropped by them. And that was actually like the best thing that could have happened for me because otherwise I would have been trapped in this record deal for like another 4 albums or something, which 4 albums is what, over 10 years, And then I felt like I could actually start again how I wanted to. And so by that point I was 20, 21. And yeah, I felt like I could, 21, 22. And I felt like I could actually, okay, let's do this again and my way, basically. And, I'd built like my initial core fan base of people who loved my music. And, that felt like a really amazing foundation to kind of start with. And through, even though it was not a nice experience, through that first record deal and the money the label had put into pushing those initial songs is how I got my first fans. So then when I went independent for a while and then signed to the label I'm still with now, who's an indie label, I already had a fan base, which really, made such a big difference. So, yeah.
There are 2 really interesting things that are popping out to me from this story. First of all, isn't it interesting how maybe this is just a byproduct of not having enough life experience in general, but when you're young and something seemingly bad happens to you, you do feel like it's the end. You're like, oh, that's it. I blew it. It's over. My life's done.
It's done. I'm going to have to get a 9 to 5.
Yes.
Yeah.
all my nightmares are going to come true.
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think that's the beautiful thing about life and experience is that you start to realize, okay, bad things do happen here and there. You deal with them and you move on. And it almost, I can say that 99.9% of my worst case scenarios have never come true. Like never, not even a little bit. So, and I do think that you just have to live a little to experience that. The other thing is that how funny that this seemingly horrible thing getting dropped from the record label is actually what catapulted you to find your sound and to continue into your career. You've been doing this for a decade.
And it's really interesting because I got dropped by that label for not having enough commercial success for them. And then one of the first songs I released with my next label ended up being my biggest song ever and now has almost 100 million streams on Spotify and is kind of was like this whole new chapter of new fans and new people finding my music. And it was a real synchronous. Is that the word? It was a real synchronous moment where it was like, oh, as soon as I actually, and that song was completely that, and all the visuals around it were me being like, this is what I want to do. And I just said to my label, new label, I said, if you're going to sign me, I need to have full creative control. You don't get to say yes or no. You can offer opinions and I can ignore them or I'll listen to them. Maybe they're good, but you don't get to tell me like what to say in the songs, what the makeup and hair is going to look like in the video. You know, that's my choice. And it was such a payoff to be able to do that and then have that be my most successful song. It just felt like, being authentic actually pays off as well, you know?
Turns out I do know what I'm doing just
Exactly.
a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Is this More Than a Friend?
Yeah, More Than a Friend.
Such a good song.
Thank you. And it's amazing because, you know, still, that song came out 5 years ago. And that was such a moment in my career where, you know, I guess it was halfway through my career so far, the 10 years. And it just breathed new life into, you know, into my belief in myself and my music and just, this whole new fan base that came from that.
And also I can imagine that experience for you must have been that much sweeter having gone through what you did, because had you not, you probably wouldn't have appreciated it as much as you did when it was working I don't want to say for the first time, because it wouldn't be the first time it was working, but this is the first time that it was working in a way that maybe that label your first label had hoped it would.
Totally. Yeah. Like in a sort of, I guess in a money way as well, you know, like in a numbers way, definitely. Yeah. It felt good. And it's interesting because what you were saying before, you said a lot of your worst case scenarios, you know, never happened. I think actually for me, a lot of my worst case scenarios did happen, but they weren't as bad as I thought they would be. And I think that was such a big thing. You know, it was like when I signed, my worst case was getting dropped, and then I got dropped and it was an amazing thing to happen. And, you know, there were all these other things, you know, I remember, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And I'm actually glad that you brought this back up, because I want to clarify actually. Some of my worst case scenarios did happen in a way, but they weren't the worst case scenarios. It's just what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be the worst case. But I think what I'm getting from here, Girly, is that it's not about what happens to you. It's about what you do with that experience. Like, how are you going to move forward from that? Because the truth is, everybody's so scared of failing, but the only time you really fail is if you make the decision to give up.
Totally. And I mean, I think a big thing for me as well has been finding a balance between being ambitious and thinking, okay, I would love to achieve this with the next album. And, you know, I'd love to get this and sell out that show and do this. But also having a healthy relationship with hustle culture, because I think also you can get so burnt out as an artist, and especially if you're putting this pressure on, you know, essentially if I'm being like my first label was to myself and saying this album is only good enough if it gets this many streams or whatever, then that's just not going to make me happy. Like that mindset is not sustainable. And I think, you know, it's still something I like really, you know, have to juggle with, is finding a good balance between being ambitious and being super hardworking and disciplined, but also remembering I'm an artist, and the reason I started writing songs was because I wanted to escape and I wanted to create a community and I wanted to feel less alone. And I've done all those things, you know, with my music, and I continue to, and that is success, you know.
And I also think understanding that your definition of success is going to change over time. And allowing that flexibility, I think, allows for more joy and fulfillment. Because as an artist, just as an example, if your goal, your ultimate goal is to sell out Madison Square Garden or a stadium, that's what you would consider the pinnacle of your career. Are all the other successes failures because they don't fit into that very specific definition of success?
Totally. And I've heard stories of you know, friends who work with other artists or whatever saying, oh yeah, you know, this artist sold out literally like I don't know, a 10K cap venue, you know, and before they went on stage, they were just feeling like, oh, I'm a failure because I didn't sell out this 20,000 cap venue. And it's like, I think if you're constantly moving the goalposts, or, you know, yeah, you're telling yourself, okay, like it's fun, you know, for me, I'm like, oh, I would love to win a Grammy. That would be lovely. But I'm also like, if I don't win a Grammy, that doesn't mean that I'm a failure. Like my music career, just the fact that I am able to pay for my food with music, you know, is a success. Like that's incredible, you know, and also, you know, if I play a show and it doesn't sell out, I really have to tell myself, okay, we're not focusing on the fact that it didn't sell out. We're focusing on all the people who did buy tickets and who are here and what this means to them and what this means to me. And, you know, I love meeting fans at shows, and that's kind of my favorite thing because, you know, when it's all on social media and you're just looking at numbers, you're forgetting that each person who likes is a person who, you know, your music is part of their life in some way. That's amazing. And when I'm at a show and I can meet people and they can tell me, oh, we like, me and my partner, I mean, with More Than a Friend, oh my, the stories I hear about that song, people saying, I played this to my best friend and now we're married and we have a kid. And I'm like, okay, 5 years, that you guys move fast, but also amazing, you know, and the way that my music has impacted people, that's priceless. Like that's incredible, you know. But I think you have to keep reminding yourself of that because it is really easy to fall into the, you know, the nothing's good enough kind of curse.
And I want to talk about your new album. It's just my opinion. You set out to create this album in 9 months, which I found very interesting. Was there a particular reason for this level of structure?
I think so for me, and I think a lot of pop artists, when you're a solo artist as well, you know, if you don't write with a whole band of people, a lot of the time, you know, the way I've written my previous 2 albums is here and there, like in between touring, I'll do a few sessions in the studio or I'll write bits and bobs, you know, and it ends up being loads of songs from loads of different kind of times and places and headspaces, and then you sort of almost make an album ends up being like a compilation of all those songs instead of a project that was worked on kind of in a solid way. So I finished touring my last album, Matriarchy, at end of 2024. And in the new year, 2025, I just said to myself, okay, I want this to have more direction. Like I want to set about to write an album in this time frame. And I want to, you know, I wrote a lot of it in LA. I came out here a lot and worked with, you know, 1 or 2 different producers, and we wrote like 10 songs, you know, and we really got into the nitty gritty, and I just really enjoyed doing that. And it was an album kind of a lot of firsts for me. You know, it was the first time I've had live drums tracked on an album and loads of live guitars, and, you know, it was more sort of looking at embracing a more indie sound, and I really enjoyed doing that. So it felt a lot more like a sort of traditional album writing process where, you know, that was my main focus. I wasn't touring, I wasn't doing anything else. I was like, I am fully immersed in the writing, which felt really, really fun.
When people listen to your music, I feel like it's so obvious that you really are writing from your own life experiences. And I wonder, like, do you ever find it difficult to be vulnerable or super honest in your music? Or is that part of the reason why you love it? Does it come easily? What's been your experience writing music that's so close to your life?
I have absolutely zero difficulty being painfully honest. I am like absolutely that girl who will just tell her life story to someone she just met in a club bathroom. I've just always been such an open book, and I think in a way it was probably going back to like school experiences, the way I felt like I could not be myself in that setting and I couldn't be vulnerable because I would get bullied for it. It's like I went fully the other way. And as soon as I left that school and I started releasing music, I thought the only way to make people like stop picking on me and stop making me feel small is I'm going to be so open and vulnerable and honest. And I found so much power in that, actually. So yeah, for me, being open in my music, it feels really easy. And I'd never feel scared actually doing that, which I'm kind of amazed by. I know that should be a scary thing, or usually is a scary thing, but yeah, I find it really easy. And I think the connections that I've made with fans and friends I've met along the way through my music has those connections are really deep because of that. Because I think when people hear something that's really vulnerable, it kind of makes them feel like, okay, this is a safe space for me to just feel however I want to feel. And I mean, some of the stories that people tell me at the merch table or in comments under my videos of their own experiences of, you know, all kinds of things that I talk about, like sexism and homophobia and mental health struggles, you know, some people would just open up about the most sort of painful things that have happened to them. And I feel so honored that people feel like safe to do that in my kind of community, I guess.
You've just given me something else very interesting to think about. And that's that people feel scared to be honest initially. But if you really sit back and you think about it, anybody who is just unapologetically themselves and honest, we love those people. Even people that are kind of like crass and bitchy, even, it's kind of, there's something refreshing about the honesty.
Totally.
Why do you think that is? Like, why is it that if you look at things objectively, you can see that being honest is a superpower? Why do you think that people are scared at first, number one? And number two, why do you think people resonate so strongly with honesty in music?
I think people are scared to be honest and open and vulnerable because of experiences that we have very young, you know, like they're such formative times. And if you're open and you're mocked for it at home or in the family or at school or, you know, but also when we become adults and we have all of the just oppressive societal expectations on us, it can become really really scary to step outside of this sort of safe box that we're in. But I think people connect with honesty in music and art in general because it's refreshing and it sort of it makes them see that is possible for me to do. I can do that. If this person's doing it, I can do it. And people don't want to be lied to. People can really smell authenticity and they can really smell inauthenticity. And especially I notice a lot more with, you know, my fans, younger fans as well, that have had social media kind of growing up as well. People really know when you're not being real, you know, and even if someone's artist project is like an alter ego, but that can still be real because it's they're creating this character and they really believe in it. But I think people can really sense when something feels fake, and so they like when you're honest and authentic.
And girly, you have sustained a successful career now for a decade. How are you defining success in this moment?
It's interesting. I've gone through a real roller coaster with how I feel about this next album. I think when I was making it, that felt like success because I just felt like I am loving this process of making this music, and the feeling of, I think the first demo that I heard from the album that had live drums on it, I cried because it was one of my best friends who plays drums for me on tour in the States. It was her playing drums on it. And it was this song about something really painful that had happened to me a few years ago, but I felt like I was reclaiming it and it felt really positive. And then I made it with a producer who's a good friend of mine. And I just had all these feelings of like, wow, this happened because I had an idea and I brought all these people together, and now people are going to get to hear it and have their own connection to it. And just the process of creativity made me feel so successful when I was making the album. And then when I started putting it out, I got quite a lot of fear because there was suddenly this new thing of, okay, now it's going online and how are the numbers looking and are people seeing it? And it has been hard with a lot of the social media apps have changed ownership. And as a very outspoken, queer, feminist, woman, a lot of my stuff does get censored actually. And the algorithm is quite like a beast sometimes. And, a lot of the time, I'll share things that either don't reach my fans or they reach literally the opposite of my fans, like loads of like hateful comments. And so I think being faced with, making this baby and just feeling in this lovely like little cocoon of creation and then putting it out, initially I felt really fearful and I felt like, oh no, what if people don't like it? What if it doesn't do well? And then I was like, well, what does do well mean? And I was talking to a friend about it who said, what are you scared of actually? And I was like, I think I'm scared of how I'll feel about myself actually. And she was like, well, isn't that kind of wonderful? Because that's the thing you can control is like, actually, it doesn't matter if this album isn't Billboard Hot 100, because you're gonna put it out and you're gonna have had an amazing time making it, and you're gonna have people listen to it who will connect with it in their own way. Then you'll get to go and do this tour and you'll get to play shows and meet people and connect. And then she was like, even if it doesn't take your career to this huge blow up new level, even if it just like you make some new fans, like you still have some other ones, you connect, you go on tour, and then you just do it all again. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that success? And that conversation with that friend really actually switched my mentality about it, because I was like, wait, I feel so lucky. I feel so grateful to be able to do this as my job. And that's so special. And I've also been doing The Artist's Way, which I don't know if you've heard of this book, but oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's this sort of book that was written in the 90s by this woman called Julia Cameron, who was teaching these like creative courses for people to climb out of their heads and just make, and stop being so kind of fearful really about, what about the future and what about this? And it's been really amazing. And it's all about kind of that stuff. It's all about, how do you define success for yourself, and making sure that even if you can have ambitions for your art, but also like combining art and commercial success, you have to really make sure you don't lose yourself, I guess.
Girly, in any creative industry, I think especially in the creative industries, the highs are really high, the lows can be really low. So I think that it's really important to find like a balance in this crazy industry. What do you do to keep yourself grounded, whether something's going really well or something disappointing has happened?
I think for me, I really try and have a healthy balance with screen time and also with working hours. I saw this meme that said, yeah, I chose not to do a 9 to 5. Now I do a 24/7. And it's this thing of like when you work for yourself and you're a creative or a freelancer or whatever, you know, a lot of the time when you're a creative and a freelancer, you feel like that's going to give you more freedom, and it absolutely does. But a lot of the time, you can be so hard on yourself that you actually make yourself work way more than is healthy, and you can really burn yourself out. And I think for me, I really try and, you know, have my time. I have so many hobbies that I love doing, and I really try and keep my weekends and my evenings like for me. And I love nature. I'm a big like snowboarding, surfer, skater girl. Like I love, you know, board sports, and I have a little van, and I love taking my van on trips with my girlfriend, and I love animals. And there's so many things I love that like are separate from my identity as girly, you know? And I think making sure that I nurture that part of myself, and prioritize rest and non-career related stuff is really important. And it's as important, honestly, because, you know, we only have one life. And yeah, my career is really important to me, but also I don't want to look back and be like, oh, I had all these hobbies and all these, you know, time with friends and things that I didn't do because I felt like I had to just do this, you know? So yeah, balance.
Another great point you're bringing up, because I remember when I first started, when I started my first business, one of my best friends said, oh my gosh, it must be so nice to be able to control your schedule. And I said, actually, the schedule controls me. And
100%. Oh my God, literally.
well, and if you don't keep balance in mind, it's very easy to lose balance. So I'm glad you brought this up.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. The schedule controls me. Definitely.
Girly, what is the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
I think that we need to worship ourselves and practice that worship. You know, I sort of think a lot about how if someone's religious, they really prioritize and practice like the spirituality of, you know, taking time for those beliefs. And maybe they go to a place when they pray, or they have little, you know, rituals or celebrations for that. And I think for me, I've realized I need to do that for myself as well. Like I need to carve out time for me, and I need to have celebrations for myself, and I need to take time to appreciate myself, not in like an not in like an I am God way, but like just a way of, you know, we deserve to be so kind to ourselves. Yeah.
And where is the best place that people can keep up with you and listen to all of your amazing music?
So if you want to keep up with me and my yapping, it's girly music on all social media, Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff. And then on all of the streaming sites and YouTube, I'm just girly, GIRLI.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to include the links to all of your social media handles in the episode notes below. That way, anybody who wants to easily just check out your stuff by clicking down below, they can do that. And Girly, if you could go back in time and offer your younger self one bit of advice, specifically tailored to you and your life's journey, maybe if we can go back to the young girl who's being bullied in grade school before you embarked on your music career, what would you tell her?
I would tell her that actually you have so much more power than you think you do. And I would also tell her that you're going to end up doing music and you won't actually need any of your exam results or your behavior reports. So if you want to say something mean back, don't be scared. The amount that I was like, I can't stand up for myself because what if I get in trouble? I'm like, stand up for yourself, girl.
Well, Girly, thank you so much for doing this. This was amazing. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.